Operation Ivy found a way to be like this precious moment in time kind of thing, and none of the members had to die or become these like tragic figures. And they just never did it again. And they have held
That's a
to
good
that,
point.
and it has kept so much of like the mystique.
What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review Podcast. This week's going to be fun. Rob and I are talking about, well, everybody's favorite ska-punk band, Operation Ivy, which, if it's not, it should be. It's a fact, bro. I almost wore that shirt. I'm glad I didn't now. Sitting here looking like a couple of goobers. And then we're going to talk about, like, their like protege of sorts, the Suicide Machines. So we got a lot to talk about tonight. Before we get into that, I just want to do like retroactive look at Let the Dominoes Fall and then the 1 year anniversary of Tomorrow Never Comes. Let the Dominoes Fall and Tomorrow Never Comes both dropped on June 2nd. And right now we're recording this on the 4th of June. So 2 days ago, we had the first anniversary of Tomorrow Never Comes and then the 15th of Dominoes. And I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on those records, especially Tomorrow Never Comes, as it has been out a year now. Kind of how you feeling about it? Are you still excited about it? You still listen to it at all? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say the re-listenability has worn off at this point, which I think it's pretty typical with an album like a year in. That's like the worst time ever to still sort of reflect on an album. Because it's not new enough to be interesting, but it's not old enough to quite yet be classics. That's kind of where I am with it. At the time, I saw that post on Instagram yesterday, and I was kind of stunned that a year had already passed because I was really into that. I was really into it when it came out, and like all of last summer, I just really dug into that album because it was such an accessible album, like as short as it was. And as fun as it was to get through, and I've said it before, I really like the second part of that album too, almost as much as the first. So I find it very listenable from beginning to end. So I have very high opinions of that album. I just haven't found myself going back to it a whole lot since probably about the fall.
Okay. So it's interesting because that record, while I really love it, it's in my top 3 Rancid albums. So I got high on it when it first came out, and I said it might have been my second favorite. And then I changed that to be top 3, and I still think I'm holding it in that top 3 for me. I don't necessarily think it's their top 3 best. It's just my top 3 favorite. I've learned to understand and be able to accept that best and my favorite aren't always the same thing, and that's okay. It's just my favorite. And one of the reasons that it holds a special place for me is my kids, it's their first exposure to a new Rancid album, and they both really liked it. And my daughter knows the words to like half of the songs on there, and she's only 9. So it's got this like different appeal to me. And so we did a stream the other night, which is another conversation. This shit's driving me crazy with YouTube. But we covered that one, and then some just some choice songs off Dominoes. It's a really long album. I didn't want to do both albums on one stream, but that one, the fact that it does clock in at like 29 minutes is pretty amazing. I really like it a lot. It comes in, gets the job done, and leaves you wanting more versus leaving you exhausted. But I think that at the age they are, to be able to pull an album off like that, being their 10th record, and still being able to bring in good quality music, and then having it have its own unique flavor at the same time, because that's the one where Brandon really shines. It's his first opportunity to really be like, look at my balls, check these things out. And he just goes in and just slays that record.
Yeah, and it's not a nostalgia record, and that's always going to be my takeaway from it. No matter how much I continue to listen to it going forward, it wasn't a record that really sounds like it sounds like all of their catalog, but it doesn't sound like any one particular album. It doesn't sound like they're just kind of going back to a certain well. It felt like this was a good faith effort, and it very much also sounds like men in their almost 60s or right about where they're at. And it's like a little later on tonight, we're going to talk about a lot of these same people when they were teenagers. And completing the other end of that loop. So I think it's very authentic in that way, because they weren't just trying to make a Rancid record because they're Rancid and there's this thing to uphold. It sounded like it was a genuine attempt at a record. That's what I really respect about that album.
It is kind of like that. It's like they it's not kind of like that. It's like that. It felt like a record that they wanted to put out versus one that they felt obligated to drop in our laps. It's like they weren't dropping this is our last album on the deal thing, because they don't do that. They got their own label. It's distributed by Epitaph, but it's put out on Hellcat, so they can do whatever they want whenever they want. And I think there's a lot of reflection on that album that you didn't get in the early Rancid stuff, because they are older, and I really relate to that a lot. And I think after a year, that album has held up pretty well. I'd like to see how I feel about it in another 4 and see if I still listen to it, because I still listen to that record, man. If I'm looking for Rancid music right now, I'm either going to pull out the Out Come the Wolves stuff because it's my favorite, or Tomorrow Never Comes because it's the one I've heard the least, or maybe Troublemaker because I really like that one a lot too.
Yeah.
But it's still holding up. I'm still listening to it a lot. I think I might listen to music more than you a little bit right now, because I have a job that allows for that. So like during the day, I can listen to music pretty much all day. And so I think I just ingest just hourly a little more music than you right now. So I honestly, I need to have stuff that I can go back to, and I need some variety. So, I don't have the, I've only got 3 hours this week to literally listen to music. I've got like plenty of time. So I want to find stuff that I'm not bored of yet a lot of times.
I do want to say, dude, I think like lyrically, like thematically, if it is their last album, it would be a good last chapter, because there's a lot of themes of old age and death and finality on the record. It's their 10th record. If it just happened to be, which I don't think is the case. I think they've talked about, they have material that they've been working on or have worked on. I don't think like that door is shut. But if they decided that was it, if they called it quits, which again, this many years in, no one would ever blame them for calling it a career at this point. I think that would be a fitting last album for them.
I agree. So something that I like that's on my channel is that you can go back and watch my very first listen to the record, and you can watch me in real time, realize that might be the last time I get to hear new Rancid music. And that simultaneously excited me and made me just incredibly sad. So I don't think we'll ever get no Tim music if he's around kicking, but as a band, they've all got a lot of stuff going on now. They aren't young anymore. It's getting harder to put out music and be in the same room with each other, so I don't know. I think as an album, it still holds up really well. I'm really happy with it. And I agree, if it ends up being their last, and I think that it's kind of like going out on a win. If you're a fighter, you go out and you get a win. It's like, it may not be the championship belt that I got, but I went out on a win. And it's like, okay, it's not Out Come the Wolves, but it could have been real bad. They could have really just swung and missed, and there's
parody of themselves or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And, there's always going to be haters, but that album is pretty widely appreciated, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
So on like the other side of that coin, how do you feel about Let the Dominoes Fall these days, man?
Another one that, quite frankly, I don't go back to a ton.
Interesting.
Probably for the same reason of its relative newness, even though it's as old as it is, it still is always the new side of their career. And that's just based on where the band is situated. I like that album though. I like that album
really
a lot.
See, I put that one on there, and like I think they have like 3 chapters versus 2, and they don't have like an old and new. They've got like all the way up till Life Won't Waits. Then they've got, I guess I'd probably say all the way up to like 2000, I guess even. And then they've got the middle chapter, which is Indestructible and Dominoes, and then they've got the last chapter, which is Honor. Now, admittedly, the second and third parts, I guess you could lump them together. I don't see why you would.
It's kind of like a post, from that.
It's more like an interlude and then a next long.
Yeah, I think the last few albums aren't as distinctive from each other, and I would agree in a lot of ways that Dominoes is the tail end of like the pop punk era that they had a little bit in the 2000s. I do, just for whatever reason in my brain, or maybe because there was a lot of space between 6 years in between, do sort of categorize it right there. I really like the album. When I did my Rancid ranking video at this point 4 or 5 years ago on YouTube, I had that album very, very high, and a lot of people were really shocked by it, because I think it's a
Dominoes.
It's
so good.
It's a very nice showcase of a lot of their career, all stuffed into one.
Right, I agree with that.
It's got a lot of their traditional punk rock stuff on it. It's got a ton of ska. It's got a lot of like the Life Won't Wait style ska, and some of the ska we're going to talk about tonight with the Op Ivy stuff. It's post transplants, and so it feels like it has a little bit of the. You could feel a little bit where the transplant stuff was going.
For real though, I mean seriously, that's absolutely true.
And then it's also like their softest album too in a lot of ways, because the ballady songs are really, really ballady on that album. They have all the guy. I used to have the acoustic. I
was gonna say it's the only one they did an acoustic version.
Yeah, because a lot of those songs really fit that. I know we talk about it all the time. They start out all their songs on acoustic, but not all of their songs would necessarily fit in acoustic. And it's not everyone. They selected the right ones. You have songs like New Orleans, Civilian Ways, all those ones, and they just really fit to that acoustic folky vibe. So it's also fitting when you think about the side projects. It's also hitting closer to Tim starting to do that solo work that had that real country.
That's
kind of
where
vibe.
I was going to say that as well. It's the
all
very
the pieces of the Rancid universe.
Bomb.
I guess kind of transitioning into this post kind of Rancid, like after, because the peak is 95 and the peak is 2003 in a lot of ways. Like they're still popular again in 2003, or they're off the fumes of it, or at least the music they inspired is very big. So they're kind of coming along for the ride still.
Well, I think,
and Tim's production stuff also picks up, so they're also very famous in that era.
Right. Sorry, I wasn't trying to be rude either. There's two different types of popular that they were. In 95, they were popular amongst punk and then like alternative music. And then in 2003, they started to get popular in like normie stuff,
like teenage culture in 2003. Yeah, because it was like kids that were even younger than me who kind of knew who they were, who were sort of like that. They became really big band within like the Warp generation, even if like their general fan is nothing like the general fan that the Rancid fan would have produced. They were always, and I think because a lot of those pop punk bands really loved Rancid, like a lot of that MTV core was always wearing the Rancid stuff. They always kind of shouted them out. They were always a nice bridge between, more hardcore levels of punk and still that pop sensibility, because you go back to like 95, as you said, they're with that MTV. They are that kind of, there wasn't TRL then, but they are kind of one of those bands in the wake of Green Day that's this darling, and there's young guys. They have all the sort of trappings that those bands later on go into. But then those bands later on that are becoming big and famous, their favorite band was Rancid growing up. So I think their legend helped grow in that time period. And then, as I said, like Tim's producing stuff even outside of punk, and Domino's is really kind of at the tail end of all that before they sort of settle on this more kind of lower output, comfortable level music changes. Like everyone just gets a little older as the turn of the decade kind of comes, and we're in this more current era where I think like the Interrupters, quite frankly, became more of a focus too of what Tim was working on than all directly of the Rancid stuff.
I've heard people claim that it was like their attempt at redoing Out Come the Wolves, and I think it has more in common with Life Won't Wait.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's more eclectic, like Life Won't.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's like Indestructible has a lot in common with Out Come the Wolves, but it's exactly the same thing. They got the Out Come the Wolves and then the Life Won't Wait, and it's the same thing. Indestructible and Let the Dominoes Fall. To me, it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I think Indestructible is really the successor to an Out Come the Wolves. Like the truest successor of it, I think, is probably Indestructible. If Life Won't Wait has a successor, it's probably Dominoes, or it's probably something that was released that was like Rancid adjacent.
Right.
If that album itself has any connective tissue.
Before we move on to this other topic, I do want to ask, I forgot to ask you, is there any songs off of Tomorrow Never Comes that you really, really kind of still listen to that stood out to you?
Drop Dead In. That's the one I always just go to right away.
Great song. I Live Forever, the title track, and Drop Dead In. I mean, dude, New American is really good. And the album's fantastic. And the last song on it is really good too. It ends on such a great, like the tone of the last song is such a ending.
It's very upbeat. Yeah, it's
like, it sounds like a Top Gun kind of.
Yeah, it's like end credits of a movie. That's exactly. Yeah. And it even actually sounds like Top Gun. It's got like a little.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little 80s vibes on that album too, in a lot of different spots, and it's one of those where you start seeing. I wonder, like bands like Rancid, you can start feeling even more of your influences the older you get, because you just have more. You've already done all of these other things, and a band like Rancid, especially, that has brought in so many different influences into punk. If anyone I trust to do that, it's them.
I do want to just say, like, on Let the Dominoes Fall, there are a few songs that I can't imagine not being in their catalog. And this isn't even necessarily my favorites, I guess, but like East Bay Night, I feel like is a classic Rancid song. The Bravest Kids, also classic Rancid. Like that sounds exactly like Rancid, but you have stuff like Liberty and Freedom, and I mean that song is a top 5 Rancid song to me, maybe.
It's like a Life Will Wait song, right?
Bro, such a beautiful song. But then you have that song, The Highway. Like, I don't know, man. This album, like on the surface, you're like, oh, okay, it's got some good songs. Dude, put it on a press play. Tell me how many songs you skip, because I don't know that there's any.
Yeah, man, The Highway. So that's like almost like an outlaw country kind of song that they put at the end of that album.
Yeah. And then they have the acoustic version. I just wanted to touch on those and celebrate those records a little bit, man. The first anniversary is a pretty important one, and 15 years is a long time. So,
you know
what I'm saying? Yeah, every summer we'll be talking about these albums, I would imagine, indefinitely. So, with that, we're going to rewind. We're going to rewind all the way back to 1987. Let me write this down real quick. All right. I'm getting like random texts about business stuff. And I'm like, man, I'm focusing on something else right now. All right. So back in 1987, we have Operation Ivy come together as a band. Jesse Michaels, Matt Freeman, Tim Armstrong. And I don't know who the drummer's name is. I wish I did.
Dave Mello.
Okay. I did know that. Dun, 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 dun. Anyways, so they only did like what? A 7-inch in an album or something like that, and then it's only been released as one conglomerate like LP over the last however many years. So we're going to celebrate that because it hits 30 years. What were you going to say?
No, I would say, yeah, they have the initial 7-inch from Lookout, one of the like first 5 Lookout releases ever,
right?
And then you have Energy, which we're talking about now, which is the full length, and everything after that has been like different imports and stuff like that have been kind of cobbled together, and there's like semi-official releases that Lookout
right.
and other stuff is put out. And currently, Hellcat got the rights back to to Energy. Back in the mid 2000s,
2006,
yeah. Whenever the royalties actually stopped coming in from Lookout.
How crazy is that happened? And before we get into that, real quick, yeah, it was May 28th of 1989 when Energy dropped. I just want to show you this stuff because it just so happened that I got this. Okay,
right.
This wasn't planned at all. Well, this part was because I pre-ordered them, but they redropped the cassette with a 2-tone cassette, black and white.
No, that's cool.
There's also a one that's got the artwork on the tape.
Yeah.
And then this dude brought in a record collection the other day to the shop. And so I was able to purchase 2 copies of Energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
These aren't the Hellcats. These are like 2006 or older. I can't figure out what... I can't figure out exactly what year.
Yeah, look at that compared to mine. Mine's a regular Hellcat one.
Yeah, I have the Hellcat one too.
Yeah.
But I was so happy to get these. I was like, well, keeping that. But in addition to that, he had the Hectic EP, which I'm also keeping.
Mm-hmm. That's the 7-inch we were referencing.
Correct. Yeah, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, yeah. And it's on just straight old black vinyl. But this right here, I've never owned. I've owned the Hectic EP. I've had Energy. I've never had this.
So what show is that of? Is that?
It's got Hedgecore and Left Behind on it.
Okay.
So I don't know much about this other than it's freaking dope, and it's on red wax with a plain white label. So
does it have a Lookout label on it? Is it?
No, it says recorded at Gilman by Edge. Oh, damn. I didn't even read the back of it like an asshole. Recorded at Gilman by Edge on August 24th, 1987. That's so badass.
That's awesome.
I also have this right here. Shout out to Chris Klink from Born to Lose, Nowhere Bound, and Generation Exit. He gifted me this. I believe it was for my birthday. It's just a demos LP, but it's got like all these demo songs on it. It's got a lot of the songs and stuff that we know, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like different versions of all of it. And I would be willing to bet that Hedgecore, it's probably on here, I would think. But there's a couple of songs on here that I didn't recognize.
Mhm.
They might just be, named different. And then I've only listened to this one time all the way through because I've got too many records.
Yeah.
But and then last but not least, the dude at the record store had this Rancid Roots Radicals 7-inch that I didn't have either, so I snatched it up. Yeah, but so this is like a very important record to me, obviously. I mean, how many copies do I need of one album, right? I've got it on CD. I've probably got 3 copies on vinyl, plus all the tapes. Like I've got, dude, check this shit out. I actually have the original. This is what came out in 1989 on this white cassette.
Nice.
So this is actually original. This is the second one. These are both pre-barcode. I'm such a dork, dude. I love this stuff. But this is an album that quite literally changed punk rock. Like it just, there was pre-Operation Ivy, there's post-Operation Ivy, and they only lasted a couple of years. The explosion of fame, the pressure, probably I think would have affected Tim and Jesse equally, but in very different ways. They ultimately decided as a group to disband, which I think it's both perfect and a disaster at the same time, because they left us with everything that they did was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, damn, bro, like what could they have done? But then we wouldn't have Rancid probably, right? Like, so I don't know. As bittersweet as it is, it's kind of like, yep, that's what they were supposed to do, man. What a weird situation.
No, it is. And I was reflecting on this earlier today because they are, they're like, there's a lot of things like this in music and even in punk music. Like think of the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols are like this, right? They have one album and they have one US tour and they have this big old mark on all of music history. Well, Operation Ivy is kind of similar to that. And there's a lot of these, burnout bands that go through real quick. Well, Operation Ivy found a way to be like this precious moment in time kind of thing, and none of the members had to die or become these tragic figures. And they just never did it again. And they have held to that, and it has kept so much of the mystique. Even if they do, I saw that the Doom Regulator is in the studio, and they're going to be making.
I'm so excited.
They're going to be making some music, and Jess has performed these songs at Rancid shows with them, and Lars has performed it, and they've done this, and that's always the thing. Operation Ivy getting back together. Laura Jane Grace putting together the Change.org petition a few years ago at Riot Fest to get Operation Ivy back together. And well, as I've always said, I would definitely go see it if it ever happened. Heck yeah, I'd want to go see it. It is so cool that they've been able to keep that mystique up of they never came back together again. And when they did it, they were teenagers. So it would never, ever, ever be the same. It can never be the same. And they are so acutely aware of that. And I like how unbothered they seem about the end of the band. Now, obviously, we do know Tim took it hard in the immediate aftermath. But as far as the legacy of the band, it's you see a guy like Jess Michaels, he kind of just does his own thing. He's like an artist and he does all kinds of his other stuff and makes music. He is so comfortable with it. Think about a guy like that. Like these other guys went on to big things, like Matt and Tim went on to, to be punk rock legends. And Jess is that too, but in a different capacity. But Jess is so at peace with the fact that they were happy ending the band the way they did. Like that, it's something that they get to keep. It's almost like the football team they were on in high school. Yeah, they didn't do it when they were in their mid-20s and who knows what had happened, but they've always got that little moment in time.
I do like that I appreciate that they were young when this all happened. I like that they were mature enough to stop it when they stopped it and then not try to capitalize on a reunion tour, because if there's any punk band out of the last, history of punk rock really, that could have capitalized on a reunion, it would be Op Ivy. I think they might be the one, even, because they're, like you said, all the members are alive. They didn't have some crazy breakup where they hate each other. It was just hey, look, this isn't what we want to do. Let's call it a day. It's an amicable split.
And I think all the, to your point too, where they really could have cashed in on that is because they would have had the support from most of the punk rock community and Royal. You'd have the guys from Green Day out there, doing promotion for their, the return to Gilman of Op Ivy and that kind of thing. And dude, they're so important that to everyone who made money and made a career of doing it after the fact that they really could have cashed in a way that, again, wouldn't have probably not seen that impure. It's just kind of cooler that they didn't.
It depends on when they did it. If it would have seemed impure, I think they could do it now and it would seem okay. But I also like that they're just going to do a different band. I like that because they're almost certainly going to cover some Op Ivy songs live, but like it won't be an Op Ivy set. They're going to have new music, and I like that. I love that. And I love my stinking bootleg shirt. I wear it so much. Dude, people are like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Dude, you don't even know."
It's in my gym bag right now.
Let's go. If you ever need another one, man, you let me know. I got you, bro. I can't imagine what it would have been like. Okay, so let's just say that they do Op Ivy, they break up. Tim starts. What was that band him and Matt started? They did two bands before Rancid came around.
Dance Hall Crashers.
Dance Hall Crashers is what I was thinking of.
Basic Radio.
Basic Radio. So let's say they do that, they kick around for a little bit. Boom, nothing happens. Tim does his thing. He gets sober by talking to Brett. Rancid starts. Everything's exactly the same. 1995 comes. Out come the Wolves come right after Green Day Dookie. Let's say fall 95, spring 96, we get an Operation Ivy reunion tour. I think that would have been simultaneously like the best and worst decision. Yeah, but that's when it would have been the peak.
It would have headlined like the Lollapalooza that you went to. That would have been like a headline attraction of that.
Damn, tour. It would have. Because I wouldn't have seen Rancid. I would have seen Op Ivy instead.
Because now you're having Op Ivy exist in the world of third wave ska, of like the Boss Tones and all this.
That's what I'm
stuff,
saying, man.
And No Doubt, and even the stuff that doesn't really sound like them. Like,
dude, that might have been the end of Rancid right there.
But think about some of these bands that have been around for like 40 years, but have like one little section of hits, but can always sort of sustain. There's a few in punk, but then there's a lot of like outside of punk as well. And I'm trying to think of one off the top
like the
of my
Eagles.
Head. Yeah, it could be like that, but I think of a lot of like British bands too. But anyway, they would get back together, and then they would have just been a major big band, almost like a super group. You know what I mean? And it is funny to think of where, because again, the Rancid guys in 95, 96 are not that far off from being the celebrities you're seeing on the MTV shows and all that. So it wouldn't be crazy if some of those guys reformed this band that would have been so like chic to like them, right? Like all the celebrities would have been into them. It would have been that kind of thing. So
it would have honestly, it would have ruined it. I'm so glad they didn't do it.
It would have, because they would have been the band, the way that like the Chili Peppers have become the band that like people in the mainstream have just sort of like, oh yeah, rock and punk, and we'll take them, or they do that with like the Foo Fighters and stuff. The Foo Fighters is probably a kind of a good analogy. This band that's like a piece
very good,
big
very
band
close.
That comes in, and I think that would have been a real big possibility, especially like think of the way VH1 and even some of those really capitalized on ska specifically, because it had roots to older music and stuff like that, and so it was such a big phenomenon in the late 90s, in an era where Operation Ivy, like we couldn't be further away from Operation Ivy existing or talk of them existing or anything in the late 90s, maybe the era where they were the most influential.
Well, okay, so then here's the question. Is it a good thing that they stayed broken up? Is it a good thing that Operation Ivy stayed broken up and never got back together?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too. And I think that that's kind of the topic that we've been floating around the last 5 minutes. But like, I think it's interesting because I think it would have been the end of Rancid maybe, and it would have been like the end band. Whereas Operation Ivy is as pure a punk rock band as you will ever get. They did it because they loved it. They were all about making change in positive change. They also created a new sound. They did it DIY, and then they bounced, right? The fact that anybody could ever hate on Tim Armstrong is beyond me because of the stuff that he did, even with just that band, not even including the amazing things he's done outside of that. The fact that they were able to do that and stayed with it. They stuck with it all these years. I bet they've been offered millions of dollars to get back together and tour. And they were just like, look, we have these principles and we just don't really want to bend our rules. These are our rules. This is what we live by. And it's not really what we're trying to do. We want to create new stuff and not go back and then I think I feel like that's probably what it is to them, is it's not only just kind of gross, but it's like, we don't want to live in the past. We want to live right now and in the future. Like, we don't want to rehash the old stuff. I mean, they play a lot of new music at Rancid shows. I mean,
why would they think about like what Tim does? And the generation of guys that you and I like in particular, like a lot of these guys that peaked around the late 90s, like they still don't realize like even NoFX, they're just breaking up. Like they're not going on that nostalgia tour. It's more of the 80s bands that are doing that nostalgia run. I would say though, just I'm thinking a lot about your earlier question. It's like, but we also needed Rancid. Like without Rancid specifically, there's a lot of other stuff that happened too. So kind of them clearing out was probably very very useful. I think of them. I think the analogy is they're almost like a West Coast version of like Ian MacKaye, Minor Threat, and Fugazi.
Right.
I think might be the way to think of it. Except for like Fugazi would be the way Fugazi's kind of thought of and not fully understood today would be the way Operation Ivy would have been to your earlier had they got back together in the late. They'd have been more of this fascination in a different kind of way. Whereas even the Op Ivy thing, it took even another like 10 years after the fact. It wasn't until like even years and years after Rancid had really drawn out and stuff that people really started going back to Berkeley and unearthing that scene and really acknowledging how important the Op Ivy stuff really, really is. Like that legend, I think, has more grown in time. And had it have been explored in the 90s, it would be done with. I don't think we'd be digging into it probably as deep.
Right.
Anymore.
Well, I mean, had they not stayed broken up, like what would we have gotten? Another album that there's no way it would have been as good. There is no way that you could improve upon what they gave us. And I feel like that's kind of what they thought. They're like playing this music and they're like, how are we going to top this, dude? Like we're famous all of a sudden. We don't like that. We can't be better than this. We did it. Let's go. Let's go home. We did our tour.
It's tricky though when bands go back to their original groups when they get famous. It rarely works. Right. They evolve into something else. Like it does sometimes, but usually not at the level when it's this kind of like magic type of thing to really sit there and rekindle it.
If they had gotten back together, when would it have been? Post Out Come the Wolves, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think that's when the demand would have probably been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I said, that would have been crazy.
It feels like something that would have been a failure. Like it feels like something that would have been like a cautionary tale of like, remember how
right.
Like we'd be saying, remember how embarrassing it was when Op Ivy got back together, how much that didn't work. It feels like rock history is just littered with that sort of story.
Yeah. So, cause as much as like they might've done it as a very innocent and legitimate, intentions, it would have come off a little. They would have gotten a lot of shit for it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because that's the thing that they stand for is being, authentic, I guess is the right word.
Yeah.
And that would have seemed kind of inauthentic. Is what I know based on what I know about Tim and Matt.
I think of
Jesse, excuse me.
In the late 90s, you had the Sex Pistols reunion, and that was so poorly received. And every reunion they've had since then has been so poorly received. And I think this one wouldn't have had quite the same animosity. Like, people wouldn't have had that the way they've kind of wanted to be mad at the Pistols. But I think it would generally be served the same way. Like, when the punk bands do it, like even like Circle Jerks or these ones that kind of do it and you kind of enjoy, it feels like such a small-time deal unless it's so rare. Like, like when the Misfits play together, I guess it still kind of feels like a big deal, but it's like an event. We're not going to get a new like Danzig and Jerry 8 Together album. We're getting these events every now and then of these big shows. So the best version probably would have been that, and that's something I could see actually of happening more in the more recent times with when music has become about these major festivals. There, I could have really seen some festival, whether it be any punk or any alternative festival. Heck, what was it? It was a Coachella did the reunion of No Doubt as a big thing, like a couple of months ago. I could see one of these festivals doing the reunion of Operation Ivy. You could see like Riot Fest paying $1 bazillion for that to be like the centerpiece event that they would have done. But now I just think that time is probably even past on that, especially with Doom Regulator happening. I think this is sort of the path through that in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I definitely think that Doom Regulator happening is them closing the door on that ever being a possibility.
It's good because
it's good. I'm happy. I like what we've got.
I want to say like, and the reason for it hasn't been less to do with like credibility or selling out or whatever. But like, look at the name of this album, Energy, and the spirit of this album, and what they tried to capture was basically this rambunctious teenage scene at Gilman Street. There's no way men over the age of like 24 could actually ever replicate that in that same sort of way. So it would never have it would be like a New Kids on the Block or something trying to do it all over again. It just wouldn't work the same. That's why something like a Doom Regulator probably feels like a little more natural.
You put that very well. I like that. I like the way you put that. Or you said that very well. However, whatever the words were that I was supposed to give you, the compliment is the same compliment.
I took it, man. I'll take it every
I like that a lot. I like how you put that, and I think that it's as close to perfection as you're ever going to get as well. I think that on a list of like top punk albums, the punk rock blood that flows through the veins of every like angsty teenager, I don't know that you'll get a better representation of that than Operation Ivy. Because if you think about it, you're like, okay, well, what about the Pistols? Well, they were more A, fabricated, and B, political, like on a larger stage.
Mm-hmm.
The Clash, they were fighting for like world stuff. Operation Ivy were like, right. And Operation Ivy were kids talking about their time, their scene, their town, their home, and it resonated with other kids who were in their town and their scene and their homes. And so like there's this like purity that comes with it. And I don't mean to like just be ridiculous with this, but there's a like, purity, like which is why they couldn't exist. Yeah. It's some naivety even. Like there's a little they were really intelligent, but they were still young. They didn't have wisdom yet. Well, they didn't have age yet. That's good.
I mean, they go on their one tour, and I think it was that tour that really sort of broke them up. Where also like they realized, like Jess probably realized, like, oh, being on tour kind of sucks. You know what I mean? And having to live together and all of that kind of stuff. But like it was like their parents were like helping them put the car together to get on the thing because they were like just barely out of high school. Like Matt was borrowing the equipment from the high school band. You know what I mean? Like they were that close in proximity, and they are really credited though. I think in putting youth into punk rock and into pop punk specifically. Like we take that so for granted. Like we think of like the Blink-182s and the Green Days and the Sum 41s and all that, and you think of like the Bart Simpson, the Snotty Kid. You think it's a very teenage music. You think of teenage angst, and angst, yes, was always a part of punk, but it was more anger, more so than I would say necessarily angst. Like that, I love that LA stuff, but it's more like as Greg Graffin put it, it's more like your soundtrack to your depression. Is kind of what that stuff is, and has always been said that the appeal of Gilman and obviously early on in Gilman's existence, Operation Ivy is basically the house band. They're the the Ramones to their CBGBs over there. That was the club that the kids could get into because punk rock, you couldn't go see the Dead Kennedys at the Roxy in LA. You know what I mean? It's at 1:00 in the morning and you can't get in there anyway. This is something that's literally Gilman. No different than really like a rec center. It's a public collective that has like public ownership and board members and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of by the kids for the kids, and they were the first representative. They're part of that first generation that ever did that. So they were helping define it because I was going through like the songs on Energy, and there are these cool, like you said, like these punk rock songs, like the blood of like that suburban rage that sort of defines punk. It's all in here. But what I also love about it is like the stakes of these songs are actually very, very low, as intense as they are. If you kind of break down the lyrics, most of it's about like, you're not my friend anymore and that kind of stuff. Or like we as a scene need to come together and do our thing. Like that's pretty much all of it, but it can also be extrapolated to like these macro issues and like these bigger political issues. So it colors in both lines, but there is that sort of youthful in it. Like you don't have to go that deep into these songs either. It can also just be about you like wanting your scene to be protected and just another crowd and all that sort of stuff that it really hits on very elements of youth culture, but at the same time, guys like us who are a lot older can still listen to it, and it has that sort of relevant themes to it. It's got that anger, it's got that authenticity. It doesn't sound outdated to me at all. Still, when I listen to it,
that's actually one of the crazier things about it is that it really doesn't. As far as it is a little bit young because it was young. So it is about You're Not My Friend Anymore, and it is about their local scene, but there are topics in that album that are it makes it very clear that they're mindful of the world around them and the state of the world. There's a little bit of optimism that comes with being 17, 18, 19, 20 years old that you get cynical and jaded when you're old, man. Like the more I'm around, the more I'm like, dude, the world has got no hope. But when I was 20, I was like, dude, we can change some shit. And that is all in this record, man.
Well, and you got to realize, so all the punk that came out around this and before this, again, all that LA grown up stuff, it's all based in like nihilism, right? And like the
right.
children of the black hole and all of this kind of stuff. and you know what I mean? And so it's that sort of thing where Operation Ivy comes out of San Francisco. And it's funny because punk is always like the counter to, and it is like I've always said, punks are the cool hippies. Like punks are the hippies that are like, dumb or whatever. But there is sort of that like educated optimism that sort of flows through that young person. Like you think of someone that would sort of want to be on the cusp of like art and culture that's in the Gilman music, that's in Operation Ivy specifically, that's just not present in that like despairing LA kind of music.
That's true. But did you say that punks were like hippies that were dumb?
No, yeah, but I mean that in a...
Okay,
so I know what I mean. Okay, like so. Here's I try to explain.
No, that's
this.
One of those things where you're like, I said that, but that's not really what I meant.
Yeah, because I almost mean it the opposite.
Dude, you saw me. I was like, what? Like no, I agreed at first, and I was like, wait a minute, dumb.
I'm trying to make my point of like, I think hippies, like when I think
welcome
of
to
hippies,
podcasting, people.
Like, they've almost got it. I think hippies almost have it. But like the punks just get what the hippies get wrong. I've just always felt that like in every point. And early on, punks were like in direct opposition to like hippie class.
I was going to say that's
culture.
Changed a lot though. People are more apt to equate a punk with a hippie now than they were when punk came out.
Because now we blend countercultures just as one together. Yeah.
And people say a lot of stuff about like peace, love, harmony, and I'm like, that's a hippie thing, not a punk thing. That stuff wasn't together in the 70s, maybe even the 80s. But I'm not opposed to it.
It definitely fits when you get to the Gilman scene, though. When you think about like Gilman having like the rules,
that's true.
So again, I think that the part of the country just definitely matters. Of where this stuff,
because that wasn't in New York, wasn't having that shit probably.
No. It's not there in New York, and it's definitely not in LA. It's not in DC. But it's happening in the Bay Area, and you think about
fucking hippies.
Yeah, and you think of the bands that came out of there. So you get like you get Operation Ivy and you get Green Day, which compare them to all their punk peers. It just sounds like they have more sun than the rest of them, right? It just sounds like
they're a little more optimistic. They're a little more chill.
Yeah. And I think that was just the thing. Even like those Ramones core bands and stuff. There's again the stakes are just a little bit lower with those bands that all came out of that section.
You get bands like Filth that came out of the same scene, and I kind of wonder how that happened.
Yeah.
But man, so okay. This record is often talked about as like this like ska album, right? I hear it called a ska record a lot. And I've always kind of thought about it. It's got the black and white artwork, the two-tone stuff, and da-da-da-da-da, right? Mm-hmm. I listened to it twice this week in its entirety just because I wanted to hear it again. It's been a while since I've listened to it all the way through, and it's got way more straightforward punk rock in it than I remember.
I think it's punk. Like if you categorize it on the spectrum of more, if it was more punk or more ska, I think it's more punk.
The other album we're going to talk about tonight also got the same question, but I got asked in high school, is this a punk record? And I always said it was. So is Against All Authorities. So is Suicide Machines, in my opinion, are punk rock, But like, I always thought of this album as like the one that blended the ska and the punk, but it's a heavy punk. Like it's a lot of punk rock. But I think the thing is that some of the songs that are, I guess the right word would be the bigger songs are real heavy in the ska. It's just like Rancid. All the bigger songs are the more like chill. The tempo's not quite as up. It's just not quite as fast of a song. Let me pull up the track list real quick. A
lot of the songs that have translated out and a lot of other bands have like covered and stuff like that tend to be the more ska songs. I think ska has been more the interaction that people have had with this record more broadly, even though it does come from a band that I think is more predominantly punk, as we've said.
It's funny because I just never really thought about it as that, but it absolutely is more punk rock than anything. But like, I think I think of Operation Ivy and I think Take Warning. Like that happens a lot. I'll think them. It's such a chill song. That's one of their bigger songs. I think maybe I think. Let's see. Let's look at their streams to see what it is. Okay. You got Sound System, Knowledge, Bombshell, Unity, and The Crowd. Interesting. Okay.
That's about.
I would have. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that's about what I would figure you would be.
Really, I would have thought Take Warning was like 1, 2, or 3. but maybe I'm just a punk rocker that's been around it more.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be right around but Knowledge and Sound System would be up there, and you knew Bombshell would be up there, so it's kind of
Dude, the first half of this record is ridiculous. I mean, the deep cuts on it are outstanding, though.
Well, there's like a million songs on it in the spirit of Rancid, but it doesn't really overstay its welcome. It's not a super, super long record. It's just 19 songs that are kind of stuffed in.
Well, okay, are you talking about Energy or Operation Ivy? You're talking about just Energy specifically, right?
Energy, yeah.
Let me look at the song. Let me look at the track listing on just Energy, because it's always lumped together on everything you get other than an LP.
Yeah,
like if you get it on cassette or CD, it's all of it. So
I'm talking
look
about
at it.
Knowledge Through Missionary.
Okay, yeah. So how many songs is that? How do you have a? Can you tell me?
That would be 19 songs. It's got. So even like what I have here, it's side 1 is 10 songs, side 2 is 9.
Yeah, 9. Okay, so what's the runtime on that? You think?
Wikipedia says it's 36:48.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, it's 19 songs. Let me just look at because I got this up. The longest one is Bad Town at 2:35. Or
Bad Town's so good.
That one and Take Warning at 2:44. So two of the more those two kind of ska little bit slowed down ones are the long song, which again would be at odds with the kind of jamming music that a lot of this music kind of invokes. So you think of like a lot of like those long like stoner anthems that would go along with more reggae infused music, but even this at its longest doesn't hit 3 minutes in any one spot of this album.
Dude, what a freaking insane record!
I think
so good.
The first like the A side of those first 10 songs are more in the pop punk sort of like the Operation Ivy sound, I would say. That pop punk pioneering sound that's so influential is more the first side. The second side of the record, side 2, has more of the stuff that I think you see in their later projects. There's a lot of proto Rancid and Transplants and these other bands. I think in the second side, what makes this obviously different than anything else that they ever put out is the Jess Michaels factor, which he's such a big part of this record because Matt does these things on Rancid Records, and we get little hints of Tim and his songwriting and his singing, and he's got this kind of nicer voice at this point than he did with.
It's so strange to hear.
So little, it's so tiny, but the record really is dominated by Jess's voice. I think that's like the most prominent thing, really on the record, and it really trips me out when I talk about how it relates to like the rest of what happened to Rancid's career. Jess Michaels was such a proto Lars, and like we had no idea. When you think about how he contributes to that music, it's a lot of how Lars has like the screaming side that he can do on like the Rancid 2000, and then the singing stuff that he does on Out Come the Wolves and everything in between. And I look at how Lars kind of interacts with the music. I know Lars talked about being a big fan of this when it came out, and it's amazing how much I think Lars's contribution to Rancid is very much similar to what Jess did, and that whole kind of thing. Like I think there's a version where these songs could have existed with like basically Lars as the singer through a lot of this. Now it wouldn't quite have like the spunk. I think they needed Jess for that. I think with Lars it would have been a little more of a punk rock styling to it, but you definitely could see a lot of where they got that style and that sound from. A lot of it's apparent right here in what they were doing as teenagers.
It's crazy, man. It's just so wild to look back on. Is there a song on here? Is there a deep cut that stands out to you? Is there one that's like off the beaten path that you would recommend to people?
Okay, so I don't know if it's off the beaten path, but After Knowledge, which that's like one of the consensus great punk songs of all time. I think Unity is the other Operation Ivy song that it's just that pure, teenage passion. I think the way he's just there, kind of screaming, and then Gonna Find You actually sounds like a proto Pennywise song when you listen to it. Actually, you could see where there was some little like Ska-Punk.
It really does sound like Pennywise.
And it's like if Pennywise did an Op Ivy song, it would probably come out like that. And then
dang, I never really thought about the fact that it has so much in common with a Pennywise song.
But yeah, go through it. Go to and like every part of it takes like the rides that the Pennywise songs take.
Gonna find you. Yeah, dude.
That would be on like the Pennywise album that we put out not too long ago. I also love Freeze Up. where they say the name of the year wrong because they were so nervous in the recording. That's why it's 1989. It should be like, I think it's supposed to be 1988. Stand up and take a look around. But when they recorded it, they were so nervous and he just got the wrong take in.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I also have the song Artificial Life, which I noted here could have been a song on Dominoes or Indestructible. And then I went back and wrote down, or like a song on Wolves that has that sort of like say goodbye when you see me sign. Like Artificial Life kind of has that's sort of thing on it. And then some of the other ones right at the end, Big City. Like, man,
okay, that's mine. That's the one I was going to say.
That's a Hellcat Records song. I gotta tell you what Hellcat Records band that sounds like, but that just sounds like a Give 'Em the Boot song that you're just hearing on there. It's very.
I was waiting. I was hoping you weren't going to get Big City. That's
maybe
mine.
You got
that's
like a Poet's Life kind of vibe to it. And then Missionary, I thought, ended with a bit of a return to that pop punk flavor that they have early in the album with that more energetic. But also, you were talking about the way on the last Rancid album, how they had a good closer. Well, Missionary kind of has that Rancid closing vibe formula. It's not quite as refined as they have it later on, but you could see the outsets there. It's just such a fascinating album because one other thing. I know I'm still at a lot of what you had there, but on the song Caution, there are these little bass breakdowns. If you listen to them, it sounds just like what eventually turns into Maxwell Murder. So all of a sudden he just does these like little bass doodles and he kind of has them at random points. You know, Caution is a very Rancid-y song because you have Tim and Jess back and forth in that song, kind of the way Tim and Lars eventually do it. But listen to the little bass breakdowns and tell me you can't hear
that's
the start
interesting
of where Maxwell Murder sort of ends up. So I just the last list that I did of this, and I've listened to this album a lot over the years, so it really wasn't new, is I wanted to listen to it kind of through the Rancid lens of how other things later on sounded like. I didn't think I'd find a Pennywise song in here. That was a revelation I didn't think I'd have, but in general, it was fun because it predates all of this stuff. So, and you know, it had such an influence one way or the other.
Well, one of the things that I like about Big City, I just like the song. But there's a part in the song where Jesse sounds like the singer of that band Grimple. You ever listen to Grimple?
Mm-hmm.
He sounds so much like them that like the other day I was like looking online. I was like, did he have a guest vocal spot on here somewhere? It sounds so much like him, but it stands out a lot to me, and that's my favorite deep cut on the album. There's other songs that I like a little bit better, but as far as like a deep cut where it's like, man, wasn't expecting this one to be so good. It's not one of their big hits or whatever. The whole album's kind of amazing, though. I mean, even with all the other extra tracks on the streaming version, it's a pretty flawless record.
It really is, man. Jess's voice goes into like 5 different voices on some of these songs too. Like
he does.
There's not really like a consistent register that he has. So sometimes he's singing and he's doing like the grunge thing. Sometimes he's doing like the up and down kind of hip hoppy, like white boy hip hop sort of MC kind of thing on some of these songs. It's take it to the front and we're gonna. And then he's doing like, you know, on the crowd he's doing that. Like it's really all over the place. But he does all of them fairly well, and none of them really sound really like out of place when he's doing them.
He's incredibly unique and incredibly true to himself. I think I don't see anything, I don't hear anything, I've never heard anything that leads me to believe there's any inauthenticity there. It's strictly he's making the songs that he wants to make, he's saying the things that he wants to say, and that's what you get with this band, is you get straightforward, you know, unique, authentic music. And that's something that you don't get a lot, man. I'll be honest. There's a ton of bands that we love that they're very authentic, but they're not unique, or they're very unique, but it sounds kind of like they just kind of did it for the sake of doing it versus, you know, for the cause or whatever. And it's interesting. This band is kind of perfect.
Yeah, a band that really, like, think of the ambition of a project like Operation Ivy to put this together as like we take ska and punk so for granted. It wasn't as familiar, like it's not as natural of a connection in the mid 80s. Culturally, it's more of a connection, but actually like diffusing it the way they did and what it came out with, there wasn't as many templates to go off of.
No, there's a little bit, but even the stuff that existed wasn't the same like speed. Like it wasn't the same tempo.
Yeah, that's why I just feel like the subcultures were more connected back then, more so than the actual music itself. You know, had it without like this album, there would be no third wave ska that all the true ska heads hate. You know what I mean? Like this stuff had to sort of come out with this kind of Americanized stuff that very much sounded like American punk and American pop punk. It had to get grounded somewhere.
You're telling me that Operation Ivy is to blame for Real Big Fish, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, yes, but like Real Big Fish had a couple of good songs.
Yeah. Operation Ivy is responsible for like all of us, like people holding out for ska, even when Ska-Punk gets really bad. It's like Operation Ivy is like this thing it's like your shining guiding light to always point to of redemption.
They're one of the very, very small amount of bands that whenever you talk about them publicly, I don't hear a lot of backlash. You know what I'm saying? Like you talk about any band that you talk about, it could be Pennywise, great example. A band that you talk about them and you get the people that are like, oh yeah, but every song sounds the same. And then you talk about Rancid, and you're like, oh, they're so boring. They just try to be interesting, and oh, they sold out, and then they said they didn't, and it's just like all this stupid bullshit, right? I don't ever really hear anything negative about Operation Ivy. I'm sure I will now that I said that publicly on a podcast, but generally speaking, I don't really hear a lot of just shit talk.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of only having one album too. Like that's just having that.
Man, I'm telling you.
There's less time to hate you. There's less things to hate. Like
right.
Fat Mike has talked about this. Like he's like whenever he got a bad review on one of their more recent albums, he's like, "Well, was the 13th Ramones album very good either?" You know what I mean? Like it's hard when you have this long career. There's a lot to be picked apart. Where it's like,
was the 13th Ramones album
good? You know, there's 19 songs on this one, maybe 20 in general. Like, but that's why these things in all of music keep their mystique when there's just that little tiny bit. That's why like I was doing some reading on the Germs earlier today. It's like that's why like the Germs are so have so much mystique because we never had to see like Darby Crash go through like his new wave era in the mid '80s and get sick of him. You know what I mean?
It's
one of those live in that moment forever. But again, Op Ivy, like they're all still just happy and healthy and stuff.
It's a silver lining, you know. I do think it was the probably the purest form of punk rock that I can come up with. Like it was born of something true and genuine. It wasn't the first, so it doesn't have to carry that weight because you don't want to be the first of anything. I don't. I think you want to be the best of it. And I think that Operation Ivy qualifies as the best of it. I don't know that there's much out there that's better. Mm-hmm. But
no.
I don't know that I can say anything else cooler than that either. Let's move on. All right. Give me just a second, please.
All right.
Bro, your boy's wiped out, my dude. I am super tired. It's been a long couple of weeks. Summertime kicks my ass because my kids are all still really young. And so we're like going to the pool and going and doing this.
That's your on time, especially when you work at home. Like, so work mostly out of home. Like that's hard. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is very, very hard. Have you seen any of my more recent videos by any chance?
No, I did see your street punk video was doing well. Your part 2.
It's doing okay, man. I was hoping it would be higher than it is right now, but I'm definitely not like disappointed. I had a couple of good podcasts. I did the one with Dante Ross, and I did the one with Simon Laws. These are both like really, really, really prominent people in punk rock and hardcore music. So 2 of the cooler guests I could have gotten were all done on the same like couple of days, which I thought was pretty rad. All right, let me look up the date on this silly thing. I think it was like right around this time.
Yeah, it's 96 though, right?
I knew the year. It was 96. But let's see. This is an incredibly hard piece of vinyl to acquire.
It's because it's part of that major label stuff from this time period that you just can't get.
Yeah, this is one of the... Okay, so... Oh, it's January 1st? Really? Nah. Hold on. That's not true. That's ludicrous. That's not true at all. So I'm trying to pull up... here we go. Wikipedia. Come on, Wikipedia. Don't do this to me now. There we go. It was May. Okay, May 21st. I knew it was in this... around this time. So in May of 96, you get Suicide Machines Destruction by Definition. And I was listening to somebody talk about the title of that album.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your thoughts on that title?
Well, do you know the little backstory behind it?
I think this might be where I'm going. You explain this better than I do usually. So what you tell me?
Well, it's just about what kind of band they were going to be labeled. It goes back to our earlier conversation. So that's why it's the Destruction by Definition. Because if you wanted to simplify that, that's what you're going to box us in on. That's
right.
What, that's what we'll be refined to. Is that basically what you were?
Yes. Yeah. I was like, man, maybe I'm missing something here. I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth.
Page. Yeah.
Okay. So I also have a cassette tape of theirs too, man. Which is cool. I love cassettes. If anybody hasn't figured that out by now, this is actually from '96. Yeah. Destruction by Definition is a great name. Oh, I actually pulled that out for a reason. The artwork is like eerily similar to that of Operation Ivy. It's very black and white, high contrast. And then they were so smart because one of the things they did was they came up with a little logo guy. Let me see if it's in here. It should be. Oh, son of a bitch. Is it not in here? Is it only on the CD?
Yeah.
Damn, that's crazy. Well, there's a little logo dude, and it's like a dancing guy with like I think it's got a syringe in his hand. But anyways, it's incredibly similar to Operation Ivy. And I'm certain that was all done intentionally.
Yeah, I mean, Suicide Machines are very much what Operation Ivy would have sounded like had they have just never broken up and then signed to a major label in like 1994. Right. The resulting album would have been this.
It's so crazy, right? And then there's Against All Authority, which is like if they would have stayed on an indie label.
Against All Authority is like if they have like a bad incident that happens to them on tour and they get angry, and then that's they become Against All Authority. That's how the evolution of those bands go. They're all innocent and teenagers, and then they're like street hoods by the time they get to their 30s or something.
Well, I hold on. I'm looking for this stupid thing. It's driving me crazy. Okay, here we go. So look at this little guy.
Yeah.
Not fans of Operation Ivy, are they? I mean, come on.
No. Well, and they've been pretty open about it over the years about how much they were influenced by.
Right. I mean, how could they not?
They're from the Midwest, and they tell the story in the Ska documentary. And I know everyone, like we're from Texas and New Mexico, respectively. We live in warm places, but it still gets cold in the winter. And there is nothing like some ska on a winter morning, like on the way to school, and it's sounding so tropical and like so upbeat, and you're like, just that miserable morning feeling. And like they always related that. That's how they would listen. They would listen to Energy. Like that, and that's
yeah.
I think that Midwest thing is kind of interesting because I think of them as like an East Coast band. Like I had to look up where they were from because I always think of them as like
a New
York.
Like California to me.
See, that's what's funny because I was like, what's kind of like Op Ivy meets the Bouncing Souls meets like, but there's like a dark element. They're both darker and poppier than like Operation Ivy. I don't know what it is, or maybe like there's a more as we said, like the stakes are kind of low in the Operation Ivy stuff. The stakes are a little higher. There's songs about like some really serious topics, and then there's a song about like wearing Vans, which again is just that's right out of like the BMX core stuff that you would get out of like a Bouncing Souls. So it's a very eclectic mix of a lot of parts of punk and pop punk and skate punk subculture.
Well, like you said, they were what Operation Ivy would have been had they stayed around. They're the natural progression of that sound. They're a little glossier, a little cleaner, bigger topical songwriting because they would have been a little older. Yeah, dude, this album affected me in a great way. It was one of the first punk albums I ever owned. When it came out, it was, since it was on a major label, what was it, like Hollywood, I think is what it was on?
Hollywood, yeah.
I remember very clearly walking through. Like the cover art of a punk album, at least in the 90s, was a very, very important. Mm-hmm. And if you look again, I'm sorry I keep bringing this up, but if you look at the cover of this album, okay, those guys represent you and I more than a cover of like a Casualties record did. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw this, and I was like, oh man, that bright red with the white, I mean, this looks exactly like artwork I create right now. And it's like, man, everything from the back of it. I mean, how do you not pick this up and then immediately gravitate towards it when you're like a skateboarding 15-year-old punk kid?
Mm-hmm.
So when I was like 14 or so, I only had a little bit of money. I was like cutting grass for money. So if I bought a CD, boy, it had to be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have enough money to buy shit like that. So I bought And Out Come the Wolves. I'm pretty sure I bought Let's Go. I think I might have been given that though. I can't remember. But I bought MXPX Life in General because I was able to convince my mom that they were like good kids and they weren't actually being punk rockers. And I was given a copy of NoFX I Heard They Suck Live, and then I got a little bit of money together and I bought the Suicide Machines. So for like a fucking year or maybe even 2 years, bro, that's all the punk music I had was those 4 records. Man, I wore that shit out, dude. Man, oh my goodness. I can't wait to tell you about Battle Hymns, dude, next week. I got a little story about that. And I think that this record, it's impactful immediately. New Girl, while a song about a girl, is so fast. Dude, it's like the drums start off, it's got that little drum roll, and then it kicks in. Da-na-na-na-na. The tempo is so upbeat. It's just like da 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 da. It does not let go of you, man. SOS, dude, Break the Glass, No Face. Hey, bro, it's just like banger after banger after banger. These guys know how to write a song. That's what's a little different with this band. And say, how do I say this without sounding like a jerk? I always compare these guys with Against All Authority. These dudes can write a better hook.
Yeah.
Against All Authority has songs that I like as much or more, but they don't have an album that is as good as this.
Yeah, their music is more of like passion instilling, I would say.
Right.
There's songs that do that on this album, but this album is actually more like entertaining. At the same time,
right? They are. I mean, they are different in different lanes, but like I compare them a lot because I got them around the same time.
I always associate them very, very close with each other as well. Like I generally do.
But yeah, man, and there's some really good deep cuts on this album, and there's a lot of good lyrical content. It's like it's like below the surface. Like when you see stuff like New Girl, right? You get away from that. You're like, oh, I get it. I like that song. A Van song. Oh, that's a fun song. I wrote down Face Values is a fantastic song. Look at the lyrics. And so I'm going to pull the lyrics up right now real quick. When did you discover this record? Was it around the time it came out, or was it later in life?
It'd be like in the early 2000s, just when I was discovering like Warped Tour in general. Like I remember seeing them on a Warped Tour, and they were just sort of in that mix. And I would have never guessed though until years later that it was on a major label. Like I just assumed it was like on Side One Dummy or something.
I didn't understand major label stuff when I was that age, and so I didn't understand it until I was like probably out of high school. That I was like, oh wait, this isn't even like an indie label band.
No,
like,
and now listening back to this record though, it's totally has the gloss of a major label output versus again what like a Hellcat record from this time period.
Well, I just
sounded like, and so you can definitely hear that sort of big rock production on it.
I just got a new album. I say new album. Let me actually pull it off the shelf real quick. I want to look up this. What's it? Face Value?
Face Values.
Let's see. I want to show you this other thing I got too. I'm sorry I'm being kind of wonky tonight with okay, here we go. It says, you've got no friends and you're so lonely. It does not have to be this way. Just be yourself, the one and only. It takes some time, but that's okay. Like, I'm sorry, but that's incredibly deep for a band that's singing about vans. And it's like, let's see. All right, no need to fight because everybody's different and there's nothing you can do about it. Just because I don't look like you or act like you, it doesn't make me any better or worse. I'm sorry, dude, but that's the kind of shit that a 19-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 7 needs to hear. That is like simple. Like it doesn't have like giant words in it. It's not got double entendres and double or triple entendres in there anywhere. It's just simple but deep, simple, effective, simple, but also kind of complex, man. Like, I mean, bro, it says, see, I used to be just like you until I found better things to do than worry about what others think or wonder if there's something wrong with me. You hate yourself because you're not like them. Now understand then understand that this is wrong. You're better off doing your own thing, being yourself, and being strong. I don't know, man. I just found that super refreshing, I guess. When I heard it, I was like driving to work and I was like, oh, I haven't heard this in a while. And then those lyrics kind of came through the speakers and I stopped at a red light and wrote that down on my notes real quick. Like, look at these lyrics. Like, I don't know, man. I think that it's a pretty deep song for something simple as it is. It's really, like I said, not complex words or anything, but
yeah, and I think it's not what you expect, because you do think of them as either in the tone of like New Girl or which is the one
SOS, Break Glass, Vans, all
like
those songs
no,
are like
or like no face, which is very much like a
Yeah.
street. You have like the street type of song, or like the no van. So you have those. What you were reading is more of like, again, what like you may hear on a mid 2000s Bouncing Souls or Pennywise, and that more like reflective stuff. So they have all three of those really on the same album. There's a lot.
Well,
on
the
this
title
album.
of the song is clever too. Face Values. It's a clever title.
There's a lot on this album. Like there's a lot stuffed into these songs. It's while it is a lot of ska, and it doesn't quite wear you out, because like I have trouble listening to the more upbeat ska for like a whole album. Like that's hard for me to get
Like
through.
Steak and Pickle for a whole record is tough to get through.
Yeah, and I like all those songs, I think, more in isolation. I think Suicide Machines hits close to that lane sometimes, because you have some of those songs that are just those super upbeat dance ones, but they mix it in with a lot of like heavy subject matter right in between, and I think it adds a really, really nice balance to the songs. It's funny too, because we say that they're post Operation Ivy, they're also post Rancid, they're also post Outcome the Wolf, so they also have that to be influenced by as well in their music.
I was gonna bring up this album. I can't find it streaming anywhere. I would imagine you've probably never heard this. I haven't heard much of it. The Suicide Machines on the Eve of Destruction, 1991 through 1995. It's got a fair amount of music on it. Let's see. Yeah, it's a double LP. Just trying to figure out. Okay. Wow, it's got an early version of the Van song. That's cool. Let's see. 7. Okay, I think it's got 28 songs on it. I need to bust this open and listen to it in its entirety, because it's not on streaming or anything. Yeah, I want to know what this sounds like, because now that we're talking about like the glossy nature of the first record, I want to know what got them signed. I want to know what this might be a good topic for me to do like my own video about. Yeah,
because that is interesting, because like we were talking about like what Weezer last week, and it's kind of similar. Like, oh shoot, this is where they started from. Like this is where this is their debut. That's what's so funny about it. It's like the debut on a major. And again, and it makes sense though. Like Suicide Machines was always a little more popular than I ever really could explain. And it probably because they were on a major.
Even with a name like that, it's so crazy.
Yeah, and that's why I always thought they were popular, because they would just, like whatever they would play live a lot around here, and their shows would get advertised like on the radio. They wouldn't.
I've only seen them one time, bro.
Yeah, I've seen them like twice. But
I'm watching them in a couple of months.
It was never to go see them though, and it's nothing against them, but it was always like one time they were touring with Anti-Flag, and I caught them on there, and so I've caught them a few times.
Oh man,
they've always been like the other thing. I've never caught them on like a big headline kind of situation.
Have you heard any of their later material?
A little bit of it. I can't recall it to you right now, but
okay. So this is how my life went with them. I got Destruction by Definition. And then Battle Hymns came out, and I was like, all right, dope. And then they did that Suicide Machine self-titled power pop record in the year 2000. Have you ever heard that record?
No, I feel like I don't even know that exists.
I beg you to listen to that. I want to know. I don't want to say nothing about it after this now. I was going to talk about it for a minute. I'm not going to. I want to hear your opinion on that. Then in 2001, they did Steal This Record. Then in 2003, they did A Match and Some Gasoline. 2008, War Profiteering is Killing Us All. 2020, Revolution Spring. So my point is that they never really stopped. But with the 2000 record, I completely stopped listening to them because it's so different. Now, that kind of gives away my opinion on it a little bit, except that I've revisited it as of late, so I'll just go into it, whatever, man. It's so different, bro. It's so different. I, in hindsight, really appreciate that they put that record out because it took some balls. Because I was like, oh, this sucks, dude, and I just quit listening to him. A Match and Some Gasoline is a great record. War Profiteering is also a great record. So those are like really good. I don't remember Steal this record very much though. It's in 2001. I probably never even heard that all the way through. But they're
I haven't either. Jeez.
Yeah, they have a lot more music than people realize.
Yeah, I remember the stuff from the early 2000s. I don't remember, but then some of this mid 2000s stuff. And they were on. I guess they were on Side One Dummy later. That's why I guess I just always assumed that they had been on Side One Dummy the entire time.
Well, they did a split with a band called, I can't even pronounce it, Coquettish. I don't know. Whatever. They did that like a year and a half ago. But Revolution Spring came out in 2020, and I pre-ordered that and got it because the cover is very similar to the one of Destruction. Well, it's mostly because it's black and white, but it's got the picture of their little guy on it. But it's a good record, man. It's a really good record. It sounds a lot like their older material. I don't know. This band, I think they hold up too. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about this record in 2024?
Yeah, it's one, it like that gloss actually does help it still sound really well.
Right.
So it has no dated kind of sound to it. It's got that 90s sheen I'm always telling you about that sort of sounds perfect. I think it's another entry into that. Plus, it just like a lot of that ska music, I think the music, a lot of the music, when you look back at it, doesn't age too well in a modern context, but there's a lot of modern music uses a lot of pieces of that music or a lot of stuff that's similar to that music. And I think this fits in like really well because it never gets quite as like, again, there's a point sometimes with the Boss Tones or Real Big Fish or some of those where it gets a little like silly or like you just don't want to listen to it. This one, it holds up.
I don't find that with the Boss Tones, but almost, dude, there's only a handful of ska bands that I can say that about. The Boss Tones, these guys, Against All Authority. The Boss Tones lean more into like actual punk rock to me than they do like Real Big Fish or even Mustard Plug and stuff where it is like a little too lighthearted, a little too Aquabatsy for me.
Yeah, and I think Suicide Machine strikes like such a perfect balance between the two.
Yeah,
like, that's really what their talent is, and that's why I think they age really well because
their drummer. Whew.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, dude, do you know who their drummer was on this album? Hold on. This is about to fuck you up, I think. Yes, bro. Yeah. That's so crazy to me.
You know, Derek was around for. Derek has a weird backstory. He was actually offered the Michael Graves spot before, like, not to be the drummer in the Misfits. Like, yeah,
to be a singer.
Yeah, to be in that leader.
That's so weird. Okay, one thing I want to ask you. You're talking about the sound holds up, right?
Yeah.
I also thought that the sound of the Operation Ivy album holds up really well. So, in the interest of pissing off everybody, let's talk Operation Ivy versus Destruction by Definition. So, by that, I just mean, which one do you think sounds better sonically? Do you have one that you think is actually objectively better, but you also kind of like the other one better? Or like, do you think one holds up more than the other? I honestly feel like they are so different, but they just kind of go together.
Yeah, so they very much feel like complement albums. Like if you wanted to show someone Ska-Punk, you'd probably show them Op Ivy and then have them listen to this. Like here's how it kind of started and here's how it ended up.
Or you might reverse it and go, here's the glossy shit. You like this? Okay. Oh, you do? Cool. Check this out.
It would really depend on the kind of music fan in terms of like how this holds up. And I really think that's a bit on the taste. If you like that, if that glossiness is important to you, I think the Suicide Machines album would be the way to go. If you're into any type of indie or any kind of like really artistic style of really anything, if you're more artistically inclined, I think if you're more like in the musical side of it, into like the dancing and that kind of stuff and that side of the art, I think the Suicide Machines would appeal to you more. If you're more into the art side and the poetic side of music and that sort of beat side, I think that the Op Ivy would appeal to you more. I personally like the Op Ivy quite a bit more, although I feel like that's not even an unbiased opinion because I don't feel that it's fair. I do think Suicide Machines is probably more representative of more music I like, because more music I like sounds more directly like the Suicide Machines.
That's kind of where I was.
Op Ivy is more. It's got the more influential thing. Again, where it sort of stands out on its own. I think Suicide Machines is probably more representative of stuff I like, even if I like Operation Ivy quite a bit more.
It's funny because I bet if you took 500 kids and let them hear both albums, they would probably it would be an overwhelmingly large amount of them that would pick Suicide Machines because it's glossier. But that's exactly what we like about punk rock music, is that it's not always glossy. It's more rugged, rough around the edges. I think that the songwriting and the lyrical ability of the dudes in Operation Ivy, I won't even say the lyrical ability, because their lyrics weren't like, they were great, but they weren't like complex, if that makes any sense. I'm not trying to say anything against this and rude or anything. I think
it's more in what makes it powerful is the delivery of them. I think
right.
The lyrics do resonate, even if they're not. The Suicide Machines have more complex lyrics, I think, if you want to.
So what I was going to say is that the Operation Ivy stuff, I think, is a little more timeless. I think that their songwriting ability is a little bit better as far as like just timeless, impactful songwriting, but the lyrical ability and the complex playing of the Suicide Machines is a little bit better. Like, their drummer is ridiculous. Like, well, I mean, especially Derek playing on this album. I mean, the speed that he plays with is incredible. I do think it's a very unfair comparison, though. At the end of the day, it's like, how can you possibly compare Operation Ivy to Destruction by Definition? Like, you really can't.
Yeah, and they're two things that it's more of a they're two things that really complement each other, I think, than you would compare.
It was a trick question. It's just more like let's talk about it.
They're good albums to pair with, though, because I think you do see the evolution of where that sound could, because you could argue this represents more of the sound of Operation Ivy than what Rancid went on to represent. You know what I mean? Like that.
I think so.
That's actually that's what would really be the argument to kind of debate, because obviously there's the more shared DNA, but this more sounds like it'd be influenced by it because Rancid has its own identity, and this feels like it has maybe less of its own identity if it's just purely in relation to something like Op. Again, we are splitting the hairiest of hairs here, but that's kind of what a podcast is.
That's what the podcast is for, though. We're supposed to have these really silly, senseless conversations that just get people talking. It's all about conversation. It's all about dialogue, not necessarily about right or wrong. I don't think people understand that about questions that I ask on here. I often ask questions that don't need to be asked. They're simply there to get a dialogue going so that we can keep this alive, because that's what it's about. It's about the conversation. It's about change as well as roots. It's about all of it. And I don't think you would get a title like Destruction by Definition without Operation Ivy existing. Like, they could have been the same exact band writing very similar music. That title is so Op Ivy. It's so Operation Ivy. Their artwork is Operation Ivy. Their logo is Operation Ivy. And I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing that somebody that we love that much can also be loved that much by somebody else that starts another band that we also love close to that
very
much.
Very much a tribute to their legacy, I think.
Very, very much. I love both bands just so much, dude. It's pretty crazy, man. I love both of these albums a lot. I will say that dude, you know what's a really good point to make, actually? What's that you remember how we were talking about like what would have happened had they kept going with Operation Ivy?
Yeah.
The self-titled Suicide Machines album was what would have happened. They would have gotten a second album would have been pretty good probably, and then their third album would have been like something completely different, because with these dudes you couldn't have had the same record, man. And I think that's one of the things that they have in common, is that because by the third record they had this different album, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
I hate this album, and I'm just looking at the cover.
Oh, bro, listen to the record. Listen to it. Oh, yeah, dude, the cover's wild, dude. The cover's wild. When I first saw it, I was like, I don't know if I want to buy this, but I was young. I was like, I got to get it. And I love this record now. I'll be honest with you. I listened to it. It's good. But you have to be able to accept that it's not like their other music. Right. It's like Father of All for Green Day fans. Like, it really is, actually. Yeah, man, I think that's the kind of stuff we would have gotten. They wouldn't have been able to remain the same band. Those dudes are too artistic, and they've got too much going on. I mean, look at Rancid, how much they change all the time. They got so much kind of music in just a simple punk band, because they're not a simple punk band. They're very complex. Bro, I can talk about this shit for another 2 hours. I love these records. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can find this on YouTube somewhere. I don't want to crack it open tonight because it ain't got nothing to do with not wanting to open it. I just don't want to sit down and listen to the record. I have other things I need to do, so I need to be able to listen to it on my headphones. But if I listen to this and I think it's good enough, I'll send you a link, and if you can listen to it, if you like it, I have another copy. I'll just give it to you.
Okay.
This is what you get for having a friend that owns a little record shop. I'll just give you shit occasionally.
Yeah.
I can't afford to do it every day, but right? How are you feeling about doing a Let's Go and Battle Hymns episode?
Well, like I'm not that familiar with Battle Hymn. My Suicide Machine's knowledge kind of began and ended with this album.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's not like completely foreign. But I need to dive into it. And like Let's Go has been so underappreciated by you and I in our discourse lately that we need to restore its legacy.
That's why I'm excited
stop
about
the
it.
Let's Go slander. Let's give it its rightful due. Let's undo all our bad takes for the last 100 episodes or however many it's been.
Dude, that's exactly why I'm excited, because I was thinking that exact same thing. I was like, man, we have absolutely dumped on this record. And it's like, for like, I won't say good reason, but we've had our reasons. It wasn't just to be douchebags. We were really talking about our rankings and our personal tastes. And like, dude, I wore that record out. It's got a little bit of monotony in there, right? But is that good or bad? Dude, it's a subjective statement. Who cares? It could be both.
And I like that you and I are going to come to this from a similar perspective. I think I probably have the same reason of almost taking it for granted.
Right.
And so that's going to be really interesting to interrogate that too against the Saws, because I did have a moment of reflection last summer. Like, wait a minute, is it just nostalgia with that album? Like, I don't know. But then I also realized, wait a minute, I also am downgrading it because I haven't listened to it a lot lately. So maybe it's just more of the case of I haven't listened to it a lot lately. So I'm really looking forward to just being in Let's Go mode.
Right. Well, if anybody that's like still here watching, because it's a small percentage of people that make it all the way through the end of a podcast, mm-hmm. right? So if you're here, here's a little preview of what I'm going to talk about next week. If you talk about Let's Go in its entirety, there are points that you can make about it that are no longer valid when you take it track by track. I said that on purpose. I want you to also think about that, Rob, that when you listen to it or you take it in its whole entire, piece of art, it could be one thing. But when you take it track by track, there's a lot less bad that you could say about this record, is my point. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. And then I think Battle Hymns will be nice because it'll be kind of fresh for you. I doubt you've heard that in its entirety more than a handful of times, if at all.
A nice follow-up to this episode, too. But both topics will be, yeah.
Yeah, I agree because it's an early Rancid record. If it was the 93 record, it'd be even cooler because it's like right after that.
The next chapter,
I do like it because we can have some parallels with Jesse and Lars we can talk about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, this was a fun episode. I had a really bad early afternoon today, I'm really tired. I had a bad early evening today, and I needed to have something to kind of exercise those demons and release
the old pellet.
Yeah, release the pressure, man. I'm very stressed right now, very tired. I got a lot going on, but the channel's got a lot of momentum, and I want to capitalize on it because if you don't capitalize on an opportunity like I've got in my lap right now, you regret it for the rest of your life. So I will just be tired for the next couple of months, I imagine. I'm working on two really big videos, like really big. One is Tim Armstrong. I should have that one done by the end of the week. And then one is, it's going to be Tim Armstrong. I don't know exactly what I'm going to call it yet, but it's going to be either Tim Armstrong completely changed music 3 times or Tim Armstrong, punk rock's greatest songwriter. It'll likely be that because that's going to get the most people pissed off, and I need people pissed off to click on it.
People will click on that to see what it's about. That's probably your best bet.
And then also I'm working on the Indonesian punk rock video, and I am incredibly scared because it's already looking like it's going to be at minimum a 2-video series.
Nice.
There's a lot of information on that stuff. So, all right, Mr. Rob, I'm glad your summer is starting out great, man. Yeah. Hopefully I'll be able to hang out with you one of these days. I'm not sure. Who knows? Otherwise, if you need something from me, hit me up. Everybody out there, go check out the Punk Aughts. Make sure and listen to his videos. Check out his channel and come back here and hang out with us. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. And if you're still here, I do streams almost every day now. I do them like 4 times a week. They get blocked almost every single time now. They're all going to be on my Patreon. So if you want to see those in like retrospect, you have to be on my Patreon. But it's as little as $2 a month, and you get a lot of footage on there that you won't get on YouTube. And there's also a Discord channel that's exclusively for Patreon. and you get input on my content. So that stuff only comes through Patreon. And if you don't care about that, just as long as you're here, that's what matters. But that stuff has to be said, unfortunately. All right, till next time, folks. Keep it sleazy.